Conquest of Damascus. In the early summer of 1174, Nuruddin was mustering an army, sending summons to Mosul, Deir Bakr, and the Jazira in an apparent preparation of an attack against Salahuddin Ayyubi's Egypt. The Ayyubids held a council upon the revelation of these preparations to discuss the possible threat, and Salahuddin Ayyubi collected his own troops outside Cairo. On the 15th of May, Nuruddin died after falling ill the previous week, and his power was handed to his 11-year-old son Saleh Ismail al-Malik. His death left Salahuddin Ayyubi with political independence, and in a letter to Saleh, he promised to act as a sword against his enemies and referred to the death of his father as an earthquake shock. In the wake of Nuruddin's death, Salahuddin Ayyubi faced a difficult decision. He could move his army against the Crusaders from Egypt, or wait until invited by Saleh in Syria to come to his aid and launch a war from there. He could also take it upon himself to annex Syria before it could possibly fall into the hands of a rival, but he feared that attacking a land that formerly belonged to his master, forbidden in the Islamic principles in which he believed, could portray him as hypocritical, thus making him unsuitable for leading the war against the Crusaders. Salahuddin Ayyubi saw that in order to acquire Syria, he needed either an invitation from Saleh or to warn him that potential anarchy could give rise to danger from the Crusaders. When Saleh was removed to Aleppo in August, Gumushtigam, the Amir of the city and the captain of Nuruddin's veterans, assumed guardianship over him. The Amir prepared to unseat all his rivals in Syria and the Jazira, beginning with Damascus. In this emergency, the Amir of Damascus appealed to Saifuddin of Mosul, a cousin of Gumushtigam, for assistance against Aleppo, but he refused, forcing the Syrians to request the aid of Salahuddin Ayyubi, who complied. Salahuddin Ayyubi rode across the desert with 700 picked horsemen, passing through Al-Karak, then reaching Bosra. According to his own account, was joined by Amirs, soldiers, and Bedouins, the emotions of their hearts to be seen on their faces. On the 23rd of November, he arrived in Damascus amid general acclamation and rested at his father's old home there, until the gates of the citadel of Damascus, whose commander Rehan initially refused to surrender, were opened to Salahuddin Ayyubi 4 days later, after a brief siege by his brother Turtakan ibn Ayyub. He installed himself in the castle and received the homage and salutations of the inhabitants. Further conquest in Syria. Leaving his brother Turtakan ibn Ayyub as governor of Damascus, Salahuddin Ayyubi proceeded to reduce other cities that had belonged to Nur al-Din, but were now practically independent. His army conquered Hama with relative ease, but avoided attacking Homs because of the strength of its citadel. Salahuddin Ayyubi moved north towards Aleppo, besieging it on the 30th of December after Gumushtigam refused to abdicate his throne. Saleh, fearing capture by Salahuddin Ayyubi, came out of his palace and appealed to the inhabitants not to surrender him and the city to the invading force. One of Salahuddin Ayyubi's chroniclers claimed, the people came under his spell. Gumushtigam requested Rashiduddin Sana, chief Dai of the assassins of Syria, who were already at odds with Salahuddin Ayyubi since he replaced the Fatimids of Egypt, to assassinate Salahuddin Ayyubi in his camp on the 11th of May 1175. A group of 13 assassins easily gained admission into Salahuddin Ayyubi's camp, but were detected immediately before they carried out their attack by Nasir al-Din Khumatakin of Abu Qubays. One was killed by one of Salahuddin Ayyubi's generals and the others were slain while trying to escape. To deter Salahuddin Ayyubi's progress, Raymond of Tripoli gathered his forces by Narul Kabir, where they were well placed for an attack on Muslim territory. Salahuddin Ayyubi later moved toward Homs instead, but retreated after being told a relief force was being sent to the city by Saif al-Din. Meanwhile, Salahuddin Ayyubi's rivals in Syria and Jazira waged a propaganda war against him, claiming he had forgotten his own condition, servant of Nuruddin, and showed no gratitude for his old master by besieging his son, rising in rebellion against his lord. Salahuddin Ayyubi aimed to counter this propaganda by ending the siege, claiming that he was defending Islam from the Crusaders. His army returned to Hama to engage a Crusader force there. The Crusaders withdrew beforehand and Salahuddin Ayyubi proclaimed it a victory, opening the gates of men's hearts. Soon after, Salahuddin Ayyubi entered Homs and captured its citadel in March 1175, after stubborn resistance from its defenders. Salahuddin Ayyubi's successes alarmed Saif al-Din. As head of the Zengids, including Gumushtigam, he regarded Syria and Mesopotamia as his family estate and was angered when Salahuddin Ayyubi attempted to usurp his dynasty's holdings. Saif al-Din mustered a large army and dispatched it to Aleppo, whose defenders anxiously had awaited them. The combined forces of Mosul and Aleppo marched against Salahuddin Ayyubi in Hama. Heavily outnumbered, Salahuddin Ayyubi initially attempted to make terms with the Zengids by abandoning all conquests north of the Damascus province, but they refused, insisting he returns to Egypt. Seeing that confrontation was unavoidable, Salahuddin Ayyubi prepared for battle, taking up a superior position at the horns of Hama, hills by the gorge of the Orontes River. On the 13th of April 1175, the Zengid troops marched to attack his forces, but soon found themselves surrounded by Salahuddin Ayyubi's Ayyubid veterans, who crushed them. The battle ended in a decisive victory for Salahuddin Ayyubi, who pursued the Zengid fugitives to the gates of Aleppo, forcing Saleh's advisors to recognize Salahuddin Ayyubi's control of the provinces of Damascus, Homs, and Hama, as well as a number of towns outside Aleppo such as Mart al-Numan. After his victory against the Zengids, Salahuddin Ayyubi proclaimed himself king and suppressed the name of Saleh in Friday prayers and Islamic coinage. From then on, he ordered prayers in all the mosques of Syria and Egypt as the sovereign king, and he issued at the Cairo Mint gold coins bearing his official title, Al-Malik and Nasir Yusuf Ayyub, Al Ghaya, the king stormed to aid, Joseph son of Job, exalted be the standard. The Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad graciously welcomed Salahuddin Ayyubi's assumption of power and declared him Sultan of Egypt and Syria. The Battle of Hama did not end the contest for power between the Ayyubids and the Zengids, with the final confrontation occurring in the spring of 1176. Salahuddin Ayyubi had gathered massive reinforcements from Egypt while Saif al-Din was levying troops among the minor states of Diyarbakir and Al-Jazira. When Salahuddin Ayyubi crossed the Orontes, leaving Hama, the sun was eclipsed. He viewed this as an omen, but he continued his march north. He reached the Sultan's Mound, roughly 25 kilometers from Aleppo, where his forces encountered Saif al-Din's army. A hand-to-hand fight ensued and the Zengids managed to plow Salahuddin Ayyubi's left wing, driving it before him when Salahuddin Ayyubi himself charged at the head of the Zengid guard. The Zengid forces panicked and most of Saif al-Din's officers ended up being killed or captured. Saif al-Din narrowly escaped. The Zengid army's camp, horses, baggage, tents, and stores were seized by the Ayyubids. The Zengid prisoners of war, however, were given gifts and freed. All of the booty from the Ayyubid victory was accorded to the army, Salahuddin Ayyubi not keeping anything himself. He continued towards Aleppo, which still closed its gates to him, halting before the city. On the way, his army took Bizar and then captured Manbij. From there, they headed west to besiege the fortress of Azaz on the 15th of May. Several days later, while Salahuddin Ayyubi was resting in one of his captain's tents, an assassin rushed forward at him and struck at his head with a knife. The cap of his head armor was not penetrated and he managed to grip the assassin's hand, the dagger only slashing his gambeson, and the assailant was soon killed. Salahuddin Ayyubi was unnerved at the attempt on his life, which he accused Gumush Tugam and the assassins of plotting, and so increased his efforts in the siege. Azaz capitulated on the 21st of June, and Salahuddin Ayyubi then hurried his forces to Aleppo to punish Gumush Tigam. His assaults were again resisted, but he managed to secure not only a truce, but a mutual alliance with Aleppo, in which Gumush Tigam and Saleh were allowed to continue their hold on the city, and in return, they recognized Salahuddin Ayyubi as the sovereign over all of the dominions he conquered. The emirs of Mardan and Kifa, the Muslim allies of Aleppo, also recognized Salahuddin Ayyubi as the king of Syria. When the treaty was concluded, the younger sister of Saleh came to Salahuddin Ayyubi and requested the return of the fortress of Azaz. He complied and escorted her back to the gates of Aleppo with numerous presents.